Hello, I'm Joshua,
And I'm Leah,
and we would like to thank you for listening to the Reasonably Prepared podcast.
a preparedness resource for the complete beginner,
We are here to help you on your preparedness journey.
without the paranoia, fear, and doomsday often associated with preparedness.
If you find our podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a comment letting us know. And now, on to the show. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's another early morning today
Yes, it is.
on this fine day. Reasonably Prepared podcast number, I have no idea. I'll do an intro for it. Oh, this one's been a while in the making conversation. A little bit in the making. Today's topic is education. Or at least that's the broad spectrum. I think the specific statement we wanted to make was, as far as education is concerned, you don't have to send your children to public school.
No,
You do not have to.
You do not have to do that. No.
Right.
You do have options.
Yes. What are some of those options, dear wife?
Well,
Or at least one of them.
of course, you always have the option of sending your kids to to private school.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not talking about private school today.
No.
We are talking about homeschooling.
Yeah. So I know we've talked, number one, we talk about this extensively. And today's episode specifically was brought on by a coworker and friend who I was discussing homeschooling with.
Right.
More specifically, not just homeschooling. This particular person was very upset with the way things are unfolding right now due to COVID and the moving their children back into public school with how public education is handling COVID.
Right. A lot of people are very frustrated by that. There's
Right.
so many unknowns. Even the teachers don't really know what they're doing, what's going on. Administrators don't really know what's going on and what they're doing. And so all of that confusion and chaos is leaving parents feeling super frustrated, I think generally across the board.
Right. And a lot of parents get, or at least I don't know what the percentage of parents that are getting frustrated in this way is, but just as a caveat before we continue to jump in, I know that this can be a really polarizing subject for some people, so maybe trigger warning. It's something that we're passionate about for several different reasons. We can, just FYI for anybody listening, there may be some trigger warning, but our heart is to help and to serve and to show another way, and hopefully maybe bring some clarity to the frustration people are feeling regarding sending their children back to public school, and then also touch on how this relates to preparedness or being a prepper or any of anything within that spectrum.
Right.
Because we talk all the time about, preparedness and preparation as being less dependent or not dependent at all on a system that is fragile, on a system that can break down, and being more self-reliant and more interdependent on our community and each selves, of course, for us to God, to our faith, Jesus, and but being less dependent on a system that is obviously frustrated, is obviously not getting any better. I don't think this is a polarizing statement. I mean, the federal government has been sequentially spending more money on public school for it to get worse. I mean, that's
Right. I don't really know of anybody who would disagree generally with that statement. Everyone agrees that the public education system is in need of improvement.
Yeah. And if
We
not
can
everyone, lots of
definitely
people.
agree with that.
Yeah, lots of people do. So let's do before we get back into the conversation I had with my friend, and what started this, which was a spirited debate, I'll call it, but it was helpful to him. What leg do you and I have to stand on regarding our beliefs, our opinions, the things we have to say about home education?
Well, I have always loved education. I've always been very passionate about it. In general, I went to college to be a teacher and never actually finished that process of officially becoming a licensed teacher.
Licensed teacher. You got a degree, but not a licensed teacher.
Right. But have always been very passionate about it, have taught many Sunday schools, classes, lots of running children's programs for churches and other ministries, women's Bible studies and such. But my biggest leg to stand on, I guess, is that I have been home educating our own children. Mm-hmm. We have 4 children. We recently graduated our oldest. And
two teenagers, one almost about to be a teenager, and then
right.
10-year-old, yeah.
And I've been classically home educating them for the last 10 years. We're actually going into our 11th year.
Right.
So in that 10 years, I have done a lot of research.
Made a lot of mistakes.
A lot of reading. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Yes, we have.
I've tested lots of curriculum. I've been a part of very large home educating communities with lots of very intelligent women where we have bounced many ideas off of one another, and we've grown and learned and developed our own philosophies of education, our own philosophies of parenting, and now it has become something that I am able to share with others through tutoring and hosting events at my home and things like that.
Right. Because as the kids get older, it gives you margin to help out. Help out some other people who are especially right now.
Yes, particularly right now.
Right.
Yes.
Because we've got, and then you have been doing that. I had always had. We didn't always homeschool. Like there was a short period of time, very short period of time when our oldest was very, very young that you didn't. Although you.
I did not want to homeschool. I did not want to homeschool. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. You were the one who wanted me to homeschool from the very beginning, and I said absolutely not. Right,
because I have very, very, very strong beliefs on institutionalized anything.
Right.
Governments.
Right. Well, and you had such a horrible experience. Your own public school experience was really bad. And so I think that had a lot to do with it.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you add on to that your more libertarian beliefs and perspectives on things, it was a no-brainer for you. For me, it was a complete opposite. It was absolutely, I will not over my dead body, because what I valued was what I thought at the time was my sanity.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I thought that there was absolutely no way I could spend all day with my children. I needed a break. I needed space to send them away. And of course, that was incorrect.
Right.
I did need that, but I needed that for reasons that were not altogether proper and appropriate for a parent.
Oh, right. That can be
that's a separate conversation.
It is a separate conversation, yes. Because we do talk with lots of
now you start getting more into parenting and the heart of things.
Right.
And that's not really what we're talking about today. However, that is my journey. It's part of it, but that's part of my journey, was having to deal with my own attitudes and heart towards my kids.
And in some degree, selfishness.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It was. Absolutely. It was absolutely selfish.
Yeah. And so my friend, super frustrated right now with the state of things, trying to acclimate back. They're getting computers, but the computers don't work, and the curriculums don't work, and this doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and the teachers don't know what they're doing, and the public education are scrambling, and now in other parts of the country it might be going seamlessly, smooth. I don't know.
I don't know how it is in Maine.
Right, but I can imagine, given the state of how the federal government operates, it's probably more frustration than it is good times. I can imagine. So I want to specifically, and if you're young and you don't have children right now, this podcast, well, I think it'll be beneficial in that when you do have children, or at least it'll give you another way to think of something before you have children.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you go into parenthood, regarding there are other ways. We would say there are better ways. I mean, I firmly believe that there are better ways than having the federal government raise our children for us. But that's a paradigm shift for people because they've been doing it so long.
It's a huge paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift.
Huge. And so I want to encourage our listeners too to just sit back and listen to what we're saying here. We're acknowledging that it is a massive paradigm shift and that it can be very challenging to hear. But if you can just listen and receive it kind of at face value, I think, and we're not saying that you have to just run out, and yank your kids out of school right this second.
Although I would like you to do that.
Well, but I'm also, I would advocate actually that you not do that.
Right.
And that you would spend some time preparing yourself and your household and your family for such a huge thing. I think COVID really threw a lot of people in the fire. And I think that was unfair in a way. I had a lot of families telling me that they hated homeschooling. I can't believe that you homeschool. Like, what is this? And I would always stop them. Wait. Hold on. You're not homeschooling.
Right.
You are trying to do public school at home.
Big difference.
And that is not the same thing.
It's not
at
the
all.
same thing.
Not to mention, you were also...
Wait, hold on. Back up. Sorry.
Go ahead.
They wouldn't say it in a degree like, you're an idiot, how are you homeschooling? They would be
No, they would be
by,
shocked.
Like,
how do you handle this? How can you do this? I could never do this on a regular basis, year in, year out.
Right.
And I would always, we need to majorly clarify this because you're not homeschooling. You are, again, doing public school at home.
You
are also thrust into this situation against your will with no preparation, no mental time to gather your wits about you and do some research, and not to mention time to prepare your family and your household for such a big shift. Right. So just being thrust into that. So please don't make the assumption that what you were doing during COVID is homeschooling, because true homeschooling, it was not.
But I would say that from a prepper point of view, it does expose some of the breakdown in the way our society thinks and behaves and moves, similarly to people panic buying toilet paper.
Right.
When the doors are closed on the schools, people are like, oh,
people
crap.
Panic. Yeah, people
what
panicked.
on earth? And you don't have to live that way. So even if you don't go exclusively, let's say we don't sway you, or the information we give you today or in the future isn't one of those like, wow, aha, I'm going to do it this way type things. Just shed some light on the fact that being on cruise control in your life is not healthy. And being completely dependent on somebody else to do everything for you, whether that be make your food, even shop for you, educate your children. When you delegate out, we talk about, I guess we'll get into the authority idea of it, but when you're on cruise control in your life and so many other people things are delegated within your life, when anything catastrophic can happen, it doesn't even have to be catastrophic. It could just be disruptive.
Yes.
Sends people into chaos.
It throws everything into a tailspin.
Yeah, and it's not, that is what we talk about too, is not necessary in any capacity. And that is to maybe bring the idea of spending time with your children and time with your family up that off of iPads, off of telephones.
Yes, please take your kids off of devices for
gravy.
Pete's sake.
Off the television set, off of those things, and sit with them and play board games and read with them and get like kind of a precursory foundation for spending time with your children, so that when you're forced to do it, you're not pulling your hair out going, I can't deal with these kids as though they're somebody else's, which frustrates me. And my heart hurts for children when that happens. And I'm going to say this right now. This is going to be a very polarizing statement for a lot of people, but if you right now, through COVID, are doing the stereotype of drinking your way through your family's education and through your family's home time, stop it. It's terrible. It's destroying you. It's destroying your family. You don't even know it. And if you're just drinking your way through, waiting for public schools to open back up, please, please, I'm begging you, don't do that. It was cute in the beginning when we were just joking about homeschool and blah, blah, blah. But 6, 7 months into this, if you're just whining, drinking wine,
Like drink,
and then
literally,
whining,
whining and whining.
You're way into quote unquote adulting or parenthood. Please just put on your big girl and your big boy pants, step up to the plate and realize, okay, things have changed a little, even if I don't like it. And please stop drinking your way through your child's life. I fear that in 20 years from now or 18 years from now, these poor children are going to be worse off than the stereotype of what we have, the stereotype of millennials from drinking their way through our kids' lives. Please stop.
Yeah.
Please.
Yes.
Please don't do that.
Please don't. It's not worth it.
A rant. No.
Okay. End of rant.
Hopefully. But a better way. So here's what happens. I have a conversation with my friend. He's frustrated. And then we start getting into, I'm questioning why some libertarian, Republican, or people who are freedom-loving patriots, they say, can say that one thing out of the side of their mouth, where they'll say less government, or they'll say the government shouldn't, and no taxing, and no this and that. Yet they will fight, and what they'll say is socialism is evil, communism is evil. Mm-hmm. And I know there are people who like socialism and like communism, and that's a different discussion altogether. But for the majority of Americans who are the self-proclaimed patriots,
right,
and out of the other side of their mouth, and this happens a lot, it's happening more and more now because of COVID, defend the public education system, which is based on socialist principles. So I'm not going to get into socialism communism. I'm just saying the conversation went in this way because of how upset he was with the public education system. But it's like defending the one thing that you say you don't like. And I was very confused by it. I'm like, I need you to help me reconcile. Well, that conversation got kind of heated. He felt like I was calling him something that he wasn't, things like that. But what we really kind of started to get to the heart of it, and that was this, that he believed very strongly that although he believes on this side of this side of the debate that, yes, I would like less government. Yes, I don't want to be as dependent on things. And yes, I want to have more authority in my own life. And yes, I want to do all of these things. That when it came to schooling specifically, if he were to yank his children or pull his children out of public school, he would be fined or worse, be jailed. He believed this.
Right.
He believed he would get in trouble. CPS would be at his door. He thought, in other words, that it was illegal to take your children out of public school. And in order to home educate them, you had to be certified and there had to be some sort of system in place that proves that you're allowed to homeschool so that the government doesn't arrest you or fine you. And I was like, that is, at least in the state we're in fact, we lived in California for a long time. It wasn't true there either.
Yeah, even in California.
I
think Pennsylvania is one of the most strict, but even in Pennsylvania, you're still allowed to home educate.
Right, allowed, quote unquote, allowed, as though that it's some sort of what is it?
Privilege being granted to you.
Yeah, being granted to us by the government.
By the benevolent
Right.
uncle.
So that debate, it was heated and then it came down and he was like, well, so he says, I have no idea how I could do that. I don't want my children. This particular person does not want his kid in public school. Doesn't want it at all. Would like to homeschool. Is having conversations with his wife about it because they feel the tension. We're like, we just don't like the way this is headed with public school. Whatever it is, whether it's their faith, their not lack of faith, whether it's sexual education, whether there's just things that the public education system are doing that don't like.
Sure.
And it's being compounded right now by how it's being handled with COVID.
Sure.
So,
well, and let me interrupt for just a moment. Some of these concerns are also health related. Yeah. A lot of parents are concerned about sending their children into an environment where there's going to be hundreds of other kids, or at least other kids,
right,
and interacting with a lot of people that you don't know, and you don't know where they've been and what kind of, and your child may have health issues that you are concerned about them coming into contact with and getting COVID. And so that's another,
right. Not to like belittle that or anything.
No,
or
there's a lot. There are legitimate quite a few legitimate concerns that parents have. They're not just education or philosophy related or the way the government's handling it. They're also genuinely concerned about sending their kids into an environment where they might contract COVID.
Right, because there's some who are completely sold on the idea of it's the worst thing ever, and it is the world falling apart, and then they're afraid to send their children back to public school, and
or their kids might have a health condition that puts them at risk. And that's very legitimate.
Right. And so I say to him, you do not have to send your children to public school. Yes, I do. Buddy, you do not. And I said, just pull them out. And he's like, well, then what would I teach them? I'm like, during the course of the debate, I get spirited and I start I'm like, you could teach them anything you want. Like, I mean, I'm not advocating that you don't teach your children, but.
Well, the reality is that parents are teaching children whatever they want.
Yeah.
Even passively.
Mm-hmm. More specifically, he's like, well, what curriculum do I use? Like your curriculum comes from the public school. That's what you do. And I'm like, well, no, you can make one up. You can go to the dollar store and buy 0 through 5th grade math lessons and reading lessons. I mean, that's you can. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying to do that, but you can. Even that, sitting and doing that for an hour with your son or daughter, with your child, I believe is going to be more beneficial than dumping them off to be babysat and only with their peers. So what can you do if you don't want to send your children to public school right now, and you don't want to deal with the computers and buying one or not buying one, or trying to have your children learn on a computer screen with 10 other people Zoom style.
Yeah.
Which is wildly ineffective. Where can we get curriculums? Well, there's an almost infinite.
Oh gosh, we would be here for hours.
Right.
If I tried to explain and give you resources to every possible thing out there.
So let's just give
the crux of this.
No, but let's give a small foundational platform though. You can go to someplace like Mardell's, which is like Christian bookstores and things like that.
Okay, the first thing that I would recommend that you do, especially if you have concerns about the way that, legal concerns,
right,
is I would go to HSLDA's website,
Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and you can click on any state, the state that you live in, mm-hmm. and you can look and see what that state's laws are regarding homeschooling. Yeah.
Most of them are very lax.
Extremely.
We live in the state of Texas, and in Texas,
no regulation.
There's really no regulation to it.
No, I had looked that up for him, and basically there's a letter of intent that you can, if you want to, but you can send.
Right. Our kids were never a part of the Texas.
Right.
Well, actually, I take that back. My oldest was in the very beginning, many years ago. But that my other children were never actually put into the system, mm-hmm. so I didn't have to do anything at all. I just keep records, and I make sure that I'm covering the basic subject matter that the state of Texas requires.
Right, because my friend was told by a principal of a school, like mm-hmm. if you attempt to pull your children out of school, it won't be pretty.
Okay, so this is a whole nother conversation. There are districts and teachers who are very anti-homeschooling for whatever reason. Philosophically, mm-hmm. Maybe they encountered a bad apple in the mm-hmm. homeschooling community, and they made the assumption that all of homeschooling is like that.
They want their funding, so children in school
they want their funding, and if you take kids out of their district, you're removing funding from them. There's a number of different reasons why districts or teachers would be anti-homeschooling. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember that is a personal preference on their part. You are not legally obligated to keep your children there. And if they are telling you that, they are either mistaken. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that they are mistaken. Mm-hmm. Or, worst case scenario, they're flat out lying to you.
Right. So he's like, well, then where do I find this information? I'm like, it's a very simple precursory search on Google. Mm-hmm. And we were, how to pull my kids out of public school.
Right.
How to home educate in Texas. And I showed him, you can literally, in the state of Texas, which people might not like this, although I do, you can just pull your kids out of school and do nothing. Technically.
You could. I consider that very poor parenting.
Of course, I agree, but you can. I'm saying the extreme of you're not going to jail for pulling your children out of school, and you're not going to get fined.
No, you will not be fined.
And there's lots of different ways to homeschool.
I still recommend that you check out HSLDA.
HSLDA.
Also, because if you join their membership, and I am not a paid sponsor for HSLDA, they don't know me from Adam.
Right.
But if you join if you become a member, they will provide legal defense for you if necessary. Mm-hmm. It is not often necessary. And usually, even if a school district decides to get aggressive, a letter from one of their lawyers usually
shuts that down fast.
Usually shuts that down pretty fast.
In the state of Texas, there is a letter, like a form that you can fill out to give to your.
Well, go to the website. You can go to the website. Yeah. They explain everything in detail. There's also another website called, I believe it's the Texas Homeschool Coalition.
Yes.
And they are specifically for Texas. HSLDA does the entire United States, but the THC does just the state of Texas. Right. And so you can also go to their website and it will give you all of the legal information.
Yeah, and that was where we landed. But he was like, no, I don't know about this. I'm like, you've never heard of this before? He says, no, never. Because I can guarantee you this, nobody that I know who sends their kids to school who doesn't want to knows what you're talking about. I was befuddled by this. I was like, how's that even possible? Mm-hmm. And I don't know. That's still very confusing to me that anyone isn't. I mean, it's the information age. How you can get any information you want. You can get bogus information and great information.
Yeah, unfortunately, any information, real or not.
So there's HSLDA and Texas Homeschool Coalition. Check your own personal state as well. Now, if you're in another country, sorry, I don't know what to do for you because we're just not.
I don't know anything about the other countries.
Educated, yeah, and we're ignorant to how they operate. But if you're frustrated in another country, then take a risk, or go ahead and step out in faith. Do some research. Do some very preliminary research. Homeschooling children in Sweden. It might be illegal there. I have no idea. But find out. Because I mean, for goodness sakes, your children and your family are totally worth it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're totally worth it. For us, the decision to homeschool, once we got on the same page about it, our foundational reason actually isn't Uncle Sam. It isn't the type of education they're getting. It isn't any of that. It's we wanted, and we still do, to have the strongest, deepest relationship with our children possible.
We also wanted to have the highest level of influence that we could have, not control. Don't confuse the two.
Right.
But influence in the sense of we wanted our values, what we believe, our belief systems to be passed on to our children, not our culture's primary values, not...
Right. Some would say brainwashing. I know it's really easy that we'd say
No, it's not brainwashing because the reality is every parent is passing down values to their kids. Right. It's just a question of what are they.
Indoctrination. We would
every parent is. Yeah. If the parent is not, then the culture is. So every child is being instructed. They are learning constantly.
Right.
The question is, what kind of instruction are they receiving and what are they learning?
Right. Exactly right. And are you either you're okay, you're good with the way Uncle Sam does it or the way the culture does it.
And if you like it, then
don't complain, please.
Then there isn't, I have no beef with people. If they like the public school system, then go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But don't complain about something you can change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either you are so dedicated to the public school system that you want to invest the time and the energy to go in and try to change it from the inside, which if you want to do that, go for it.
More power to you.
Absolutely. Not knocking that at all. That's just, I would rather spend my time and energy elsewhere.
Yeah. Some of the stereotypes of homeschoolers are, number one, we just indoctrinate our children. And, number one, that's a stereotype, period, that homeschoolers, quote unquote, indoctrinate their children. I would say if you would actually sit and get to know any homeschoolers, you would realize it's actually farthest from the truth.
Well, I think that stereotype has about the same validity as every prepper is a raving maniac.
Right. We're all bunker.
That's not true.
Tinfoil hat bunker.
Right.
Lunatics that, with an arsenal and they're trigger happy.
Right.
No, that's simply not the case.
Right.
And because I'm going to go down right now, I want to go down a list of the stereotypes of homeschoolers just to help maybe dispel a couple of the myths and open up other people's minds to looking into it while we're in an odd time in U.S. history right now.
Yeah.
Number one, we indoctrinate and brainwash our children to just be little religious fanatics. Okay, that's a stereotype.
Yeah, it is a stereotype, unfortunately.
Spend any amount of time with a bunch of moms and a bunch of families who homeschool, and you realize actually that's nothing could be farther from the truth. I contend that does happen to an extreme degree in the public education system, and that being taught by one person, one specific thing in a group that's only your peers limits how you can learn.
Is more limiting.
Is more limiting and more indoctrinating than most homeschoolers. There are some squeaky wheels. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
are not teaching their children the things they have to learn, but giving them a love of learning and independent thought.
Mm-hmm.
Most home educators, the moms and dads, or the moms of the people who are teaching at home, are actually just offering guide bumpers so that the kids can learn and unlock things at their own pace and at their own accord with an open mind. Mm-hmm. They're not putting heavy restrictions on them and then cramming into them what's supposed to be there, if you will, the information. In other words, we say this a lot, that our children are whole people. They're whole persons. They're not simply a cup, a vessel that you're trying to fill with information, right? They're a whole person that you're trying to give an expression and a love of learning about the world around them and the people around them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that's one stereotype. Stereotype number two, which once again is almost not the case at all. I mean, once again, that first one. Number two, we're socially bizarre.
So this is a really challenging podcast for me because every single thing that you're bringing up could be a podcast in and of itself.
I understand, but we're
this
doing bullet points here.
I know. And so my brain is running on overdrive right now just to, okay, how can I keep this
Simple.
to a bullet statement and not launch into an entire instructional session on it. But really, socialization is the number one concern that
Always.
I come up against with other parents who are interested who are interested in homeschooling, or
it's not
who are just encountering homeschooling.
It's actually two things. I find it's either the number one concern, or it becomes the landing platform. Haha, gotcha in the discussion. Like, okay, well that's nice. Yeah, but socialization becomes like this. What do you do about that? Mm-hmm. Or it's the first concern. So it's like kind of the beginning and the end of the debate sometimes is socialization.
Right. And so the first thing that I always ask is, what do you think socialization is?
Right.
Because how you define socialization is going to lay the groundwork for future conversation here.
Right.
So if you consider socialization as only being able to associate with people your own age, and generally same class and lifestyle,
your own peer group,
your peers,
exclusively,
then you're right. Homeschoolers are not socialized
in that way.
But if you define socialization, which, side note, is the actual definition of the word, as being able to interact freely with people of any age, any gender, any background,
any socioeconomic group.
Socioeconomic status, any culture, ethnicities, basically anyone, That is what homeschooling offers.
Right. This is how I explained it to my friend. I said, which one, just at first glance, would you consider has the bigger chance of being, quote unquote, properly socialized? I take a person at a certain age, I put them in a 50 by 50 foot box with 30 other people that are their exact same age, and then I put one person who is in authority over them to tell them how they have to behave within inside that box.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Or another child, another person of the same age with a much smaller group of people outside of the box in general society, interacting with all of society at any given time, at the grocery store, at any of the stores, at the DMV, at churches, at civic organizations, when you're out serving and feeding the poor, any of those places, any place you go that's in public.
Mm-hmm.
Which one is getting, quote unquote, better socialization? Well,
Right.
that's an easy choice.
Right.
Yet for some reason, the paradigm is put the kids in the box.
Well, I'm not gonna say that that's an easy thing to accomplish necessarily. You have to be willing to take your children with you wherever you go. You
Sure.
also might have to step out and do things that you are uncomfortable with. I will say this: homeschooling educates the parent just as much as the child is being educated. So if you are happy with just living your normal life where you get to do just your own little thing, and you never are challenged on really much of anything, and you never have to really grow or experience new ideas, then homeschooling may not be for you.
Right.
If you're happy that way.
Right.
But if you are in a place where you're willing to consider growing, learning new things, being challenged in your comfort zones, stretching out of your box, trying new stuff, then yeah, as you embrace that lifestyle and you embrace that for yourself, you're bringing your kids along with you in that journey. Then they are going to be socialized.
Right.
You don't have to be afraid of your kids not being socialized because they're not in public school.
Right. Exactly.
It's an unnecessary fear.
Right. And once again, I usually push back in these conversations saying that the fear is actually lopsided. It's unnecessary to be afraid that they won't get socialization in homeschool, and actually the fear is they're not getting real socialization in public school.
No, they're really not.
Right.
They're really not.
That's how I push back on that. And anyone's free to disagree with me. That's fine. But man, I believe that history is proving that. We know that the public education model, once again, we started the conversation saying we know it's flawed, it's broken, there's something wrong. I mean, it's based on 100-year-old, well, never mind coming from, Germany and different styles of education, but it really on the Industrial Revolution model. You go in, you clock in, you sit down, you do your work in Industrial Revolution, you make your widgets, or you flush your papers, you shuffle your papers, and then you clock out and you go home. And it's based on that model. And come on, the reality is America is grown past that model.
Yeah.
We've grown past that model economically. We've grown past that model in the workplace, just generally in the workforce, and forcing children into an old model, I think, is a disservice. And that's why we're seeing and feeling tension between what's happening in the real world with the internet and private business and private entity and dreaming and technology moving so fast, but our public education system's still stuck in 1928. Reality is, and then they got more authority in the 50s with the Department of Education and things like that, kind of taking over everything, and it's based on old thinking, and that's just something to consider when you're thinking to yourself, well, this is the way it is. Well, it doesn't have to be. It literally doesn't have to be. And so socialization, please, you don't worry about that. Like, don't worry about it. I don't know how else to. It's less of a concern than we think it is, and I think that's part of the indoctrination of the public school, is that it has to be done a certain way. And we tend to say, a lot of people tend to think, well, the only way I can be taught is by somebody else who's certified in this way, and they're above me and they have to teach me, as opposed to self-educating.
Right. Well, and yeah, again, you're touching on topics that are much bigger than the scope of this one. You're talking about learning, the
Right.
philosophies of learning and how people actually learn.
Right.
And, people don't necessarily, they don't only learn. The human mind does not only learn by being instructed by someone
An upper authority
who
or whatever.
has knowledge or information and is wanting to pass that on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do learn that way.
Right.
That is
Right.
one of the ways that we learn. But it's much more effective if the person who is learning is self-educating, like you said. They're actually teaching themselves and having access to people who know more than they do in a particular subject is part of how they teach themselves.
Right.
They go to that person to learn.
Right. Well, and there is something to be said too for somebody knowing more than you do and learning from them, as apprenticeship or, and most of the time the deepest learning happens in a relationship with another person, not necessarily just because this person's certified in this way and that proves that they're able to tell you.
Right. Well, and again, that's following a model of the philosophy of a child is an empty vessel that we need to pour this information and facts and knowledge into, as opposed to a living, breathing soul that needs to feed on ideas as the human body feeds on food.
Right.
The soul feeds on ideas.
Right.
Living, breathing ideas.
Yep. That can be wrestled with, be debated
Yes.
with, that are
Processed. Meditated on, ripped apart, put back together. That's how human beings learn. That's how we're made to learn. You watch a baby and you can see this play out in babies and toddlers. They're always picking things up and exploring them and turning them around and trying to take them apart and then putting them back together again. And these, you can see, we make jokes about, I can see, the wheels in their brain are turning. And that is how we were designed to learn.
Right.
But again, we're, that's a whole nother.
Right. We're bullet pointing a bunch. I will say, I'd like this to be an open discussion, right? Like, this isn't, I don't want to, number one, we ain't perfect. We don't have all of it figured out.
No, heck no.
Like, at all. We just do have strong beliefs on some things because we've seen it, that it works. And excuse me. Anyway, we've seen that it works. We know that it works. We are very deep hearts for relationship above stuff and above things and above people. Once again, we don't always get it right. We're still on a journey too. Our children aren't all completely out of school, so it's going to ebb and flow, But the beauty of home educating or some variant of it, whether it's, you go to a tutor and then they help you home educate, or you do charter school or any number of other things, is you have the freedom to ebb and flow and to learn. You're not stuck where you are. One of my problems with the experience of my public education was that because I do learn differently, is that I was constantly behind.
Yeah.
Constantly.
So just for clarification, you were diagnosed with ADHD.
Right.
Multiple times. You were medicated.
Heavily.
Yeah, heavily medicated. And also experience in a time period in history when ADHD and anything that was not your typical type A learner was visual, the typical type A visual learner who sits in a classroom,
kinesthetic.
And so in a time period in history where that was not understood, nor was it accepted.
At all, right.
And so he was seen as, you were seen as the troublemaker.
Sure, yeah.
You talk too much, you move too much, you're too much altogether.
Right.
And teachers who I'm sure were well-meaning but didn't know what to do with you ended up handling the situations very poorly.
And in a latchkey kid time period as well.
Right, in a latchkey, yeah.
Right, time period.
So the whole thing altogether made for a really negative, very negative
Right. But even if you're not that type, even if you have a child who's, say, quieter and more reserved, or you have a child who doesn't have learning disabilities, but just, might be a daydreamer or something of that nature, you're they're forced into a mold that they don't fit into.
Right.
Right. So there's less freedom there. They have to perform like everybody else, or something's wrong. And if they perform slightly better than everybody else, they're put on pedestals. This is kind of the hierarchy in school, and removing them from that situation brings more freedom to ebb and flow and learn.
Right.
And we have found that is actually as much as someone might think, well, I can't. How on earth could, because we'll segue into the other thing that I want to talk about, specifically about moms, or ladies, or even people in general. But removing them from this rigid system gives you the freedom to ebb and flow in learning, so that and find out truly what their heart is and how their minds think. And we're talking about children here,
Right.
And how they operate and how you do as well, and how you relate with them. I have found too. So number one, the biggest thing is socialization. Then number two, immediately after we address that, the moms specifically, for some reason, think, well, I'm not enough. I can't do that.
Right.
I'm unable to do that. I don't have what it takes. Can you speak to that? Because as a man, I could mansplain. Be like, sure you do. And I've done it. But I believe that we as parents do have what it takes. And that we have, number one, have been given the authority and the responsibility to be the sole raisers of our children. But I do find that, poor mothers believe they're just not enough and they can't do it, and because they don't want to damage their children, they don't want to bring a deficit, they don't want to do something wrong, they don't want to fail miserably, because if they fail miserably, they're failing their children. And then there's a lot of dads and men who just don't back up their wives and don't rise up to the responsibility to say, hey, this is our family, we can do this together. So as far as moms who think, I can't, it's not possible, what do you say to them when they come to you with that?
Well, that is, again, that's a hard one to say generically over this kind of medium, because a lot of times I will ask, well, why do you think you can't do this? And it's, you have to get to the heart of why they think they do, because there's, 100 different reasons why a mom might think that she can't do this. But some of the general ones are, well, I don't have a certification, I'm not smart enough. And my rebuttal to that is, who says you can't learn alongside your kids?
Right.
Sit down and learn with them. You can do that, and that's okay. If you are absolutely not sure at all, there are programs out there that cater more towards self-education. So for example, there are, if you're not sure about math,
right,
there are programs like, again, I'm not a paid sponsor for any of these companies, but teaching textbooks, Math UC, these kinds of programs, they come with videos.
Teaching Math UC, who else?
Math UC comes with videos that you can watch, and it's an actual, the developer of the curriculum or his assistants or whoever they are, who are teachers of mathematics. You watch your video and you have your workbooks there, and they explain the concepts. Usually a lot of these curriculum companies, these ones that I'm mentioning here, and there's many others too that I'm not.
Juxtapose that with like Life of Fred. Well, Life of Fred is a math curriculum, but it's based on the story of this guy, this little square-headed little man's life as he walks through life and does mathematics in life.
Right. The curriculum is a huge, there's so many possible options out there. What I'm talking about, though, is that you can, a lot of these developers of these curriculum, they are very accessible. You can email them. Some of them, like I said, like teaching textbooks and Math UC, and there's others too, come with videos that explain, the teachers are explaining the concepts. If you do not understand, your child still does not understand after watching the videos, they are very, very easy to get a hold of, to ask questions. We don't understand this. Can you please help us to understand? So trying to fall back on, well, I'm not smart enough and I don't know enough to teach my kids is no longer a valid stance, because there is so many ways that you can access this information. I mean, for Pete's sake, YouTube alone is full of videos out of our ears explaining pretty much any concept that you could ever want to understand.
Right.
Ever. And so you don't even have to get, I mean, at this point, you probably wouldn't even have to actually have a curriculum, because there's so much information available on YouTube.
Right.
So but you do have to decide as a parent, as a mom, am I willing to learn? A lot of us have been out of school for a long time, and we're not, maybe we have we had bad experiences in school. And so we equate school subjects with negativity, and we pass that on in our attitude and in our speech and the way that we talk about something. Oh yeah, this is math, like I was really bad at math, but I guess we'll give it a try. And that's very negative. That immediately communicates to the child that you don't really know what you're doing, nor do you want to be there, and you're not interested in learning it either. And they just have to do it because they have to do it. And they might actually be kind of good at it, but that will kill that love super fast.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is having to address, again, I mentioned this earlier, but homeschooling is just as much about the parent's education as it is about the child's. And you have to address things like that in your own heart and in your own attitudes before you can ever help your kids move forward. And I think that subconscious awareness that what I'm saying right now about this is true. There's a subconscious, understanding that this is true, and that causes a lot of parents to shrink back because maybe they don't want to embark on their own journey of education. They're happy the way that they are, and leave them alone.
Right. Which, I use these statements where, homeschooling is not for everybody.
No, it isn't.
For anybody.
But anyone can.
Yeah, and if
anyone
you're listening
can.
to this podcast, we want to specific. If you think we're full of crap, awesome. You're welcome to think we're full of crap and that we're just being opinionated or whatever it is. Trust me, I can handle it. But really, we're wanting to speak to people who are struggling with the idea right now and offer maybe another solution, another way of doing things, or another path to research that isn't just where you feel like you're stuck. So if you're in that tension right now of what do? I don't like this in my left hand, but I don't know what else exists. This does exist. Yeah. There are co-ops that you can join.
Yes. So, yes, there are lots of opportunities. Which
help reinforce moms.
Yes, I would Google your area, homeschooling communities. Homeschooling communities are very supportive of one another. They're very encouraging, and they are very easy to get a hold of, typically.
Because we have a lot of ladies right now who are also trying to quote unquote homeschool. In other words, bring public school home, and they're isolated. So they feel completely overwhelmed, completely, like they aren't enough. And they're being essentially told that they're not. You got to do this, this, and this, and then but once again, co-ops and communities.
Yes, there are plenty of communities out there. There's co-ops, there's social communities where there are groups of homeschoolers who get together just to do social activities. Here in our area, they do weekly skates where they meet at roller skating rinks and do skating. We do field trips, lots and lots of opportunities in our area. And if you live in a larger metropolitan area, the opportunities are usually through the roof. Think outside of the four walls of your house and the books that are in front of you.
Libraries are still free.
Yeah, libraries are a massive resource. Take advantage of that. Museums, especially museums that offer annual passes, are a huge bonus. You
Yeah.
can get your annual pass and you can go there anytime you want. And a lot of them have traveling exhibits that come through that are very interesting.
If you're the type of, because I've had this conversation, if you're the type of person who liked doing something in your youth or when you were in college and now you can't because you have kids and they go to school. I mean, I had a conversation with another buddy, I don't know, 6 months ago about like, I wish I could go to shows again. I wish I could go to concerts. And I'm like, well, then you can.
Go.
Take your kids with you. Do it together as a family.
Yeah. And
Expose
the nice
your
thing
family
about
to
homeschooling,
to punk rock or rock and roll or
whatever
classical
it was,
or
yeah.
country or whatever that isn't on the radio but is live and in person.
Right. And I tell you what, if a child's love of learning hasn't been killed completely, these kinds of experiences will ignite interest and curiosity. Taking a child to a show, I have yet to see a child. Of course, I have not experienced a child who has a completely dead love of learning.
We're talking about going to see
But
dance
I'm talking
play.
about,
Or,
who is not all
plays.
of a sudden wants to, play some sort of instrument.
Right.
And that kind of gets them the push that maybe they
might want to learn.
learn an instrument.
Take them to a sporting event, and all of a sudden they might want to learn to play soccer.
Yeah. There's just an infinite number of opportunities when you start thinking outside of the walls of your house. But again, you have to be okay and embrace your own learning and being okay with your own curiosity and love for learning might be dormant.
Right.
And you might have to kickstart that a little bit and make yourself do it. It's kind of like a starving person. When a person is starving, they're not hungry. They don't want to eat anything.
Right.
And you have to force feed them. Like a truly starving person has to be force fed to get the appetite kickstarted.
And force fed properly.
Force fed properly.
Yeah, slow amounts of food.
Very slowly with the proper types of food. You can't just, shove a McDonald's burger down their throat.
Right.
The same thing goes for our souls and for our minds and our intellects. If we have been depriving them of proper food, proper ideas, because the world is full of so much beauty and truth and incredible opportunities out there. And if we've been depriving our intellects and our minds of proper ideas, then we will be figuratively, mentally starving.
Right.
And you will have to force feed yourself for a little while. You have to make yourself read books that are maybe be outside of your comfort zone. You have to make yourself go somewhere and try out a new event or go to a homeschool social thing when the last thing you want to do is meet new people.
Right.
And that sounds really scary, and I do not want to do that. You have to make yourself do that. And it will get easier the more you do it, of course. And it will be a model for your children of how to actually live a life that embraces learning and new things and growth and development, and is not a stagnant, dormant life that's just sitting around collecting food and money and waiting to die. Yeah,
or drinking and watching Tiger King.
Yeah, that's a dormant life, guys. That's a dormant life, to sit around watching Desperate Housewives and all of your favorite Netflix shows, and to teach your kids that that's life. I go to work, I come home, I watch my favorite shows, I eat my food, and I go to bed, and I get up and I do it all over again. That is a dormant, stagnant life.
And it's not necessary.
It's not necessary. It's not necessary.
It's not. So we'll wrap it up here. I want to offer, once again, I know we get passionate. I don't want to feel like we're preaching or belittling anybody. Our heart is to, if you're in the tension of what do I do, reach out to us. I'm okay with that. Reach out to me. Email. We have my email for Reasonably Prepared is reasonablyprepared@gmail.com.
Sure. Yep.
Send an email. If there's any topic that we've discussed so far today in this, I know it was a homeschool, home education, you know, one, and it's loosely based. Like, to say this is a prepper principle, you can't necessarily nail it to that wall, but it is in that we're not being completely dependent on a system that we know is broken or frustrating, and having other people tell us what we can and can't do or how to do things outside of the scope of our lives, and then when they can't do it, good.
I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that this is preparedness related is because when COVID happened and the lockdown happened,
Yeah.
we were not affected educationally. We were not impacted in any way.
In fact, we were largely unaffected, except for where our preps had fallen short.
Right. I'm talking
Yeah.
educationally.
But right now, I'm specific.
Yeah.
As
far as our
education,
kids were concerned and the relationships and the dynamic in our home,
completely unaffected.
we were completely unaffected by that. And just like
In fact,
now,
we still thrived. I'm just
right,
going to say
we
it.
were fine.
Yeah.
Nothing really changed. Everything was pretty much the same.
Right.
And so
during a pandemic, we'll use prepper terms. During a pandemic, the education part of our lives was unaffected.
right. Right. And if you want to,
Which is huge because it's one of the biggest relationships with your children. So it's like one of the foundational things.
right. This is why it is related to preparedness.
Right.
Just like people prep for food and water and supplies medical things, and they spend time getting this ready, all this stuff
They
set
grow
up.
gardens.
They grow gardens,
cultivate
which is
those.
all absolutely proper. And these are areas where we were lacking in, and COVID really exposed some of these areas to us. But just like you prepare in that way, the education of your children, you need to have a prepared foundation. And if you want to continue sending them to public school, that's fine, but have a backup plan. That should be part of your preparedness plan.
Right.
You know what? I went to Walmart, I went to Mardell's, I went to wherever, Target, and I have a book.
Or I have I have some resources.
I have some resources. I've got
some math books.
I've got
and books on the shelf.
Some simple books that I have, and I have my little home library, and they sit there in case something happens and I need to use them.
Right. So if there's any topic that we started in on but did not unpack sufficiently during this podcast as it relates to home education, because we did talk about a lot of things and gave just kind of a little nugget of information about them, because lots of them we could talk about ad nauseum. We could talk about socialization ad nauseum. We could talk about, bring up, I'm drawing a blank here.
We can talk about curriculum. We can talk about philosophies of education.
For a long time.
Parenting.
If anybody wants any of this to be unpacked in further podcasts, please let us know. Reach out to us, leave comments, or email, once again, reasonablyprepared@gmail.com, and we'd be happy to unpack them. If you just want some basic information and a little encouragement or something of that nature, or a point of direction on maybe some of the resources, because we have lots, it's just difficult to give them all here. We have the ability to get them. We know how to do the searches.
I can't actually give you every single resource that I know of.
No.
But I mean, I have a side business where I do curriculum planning and support for people. Yeah. And this is not a plug for that business. The point that I'm making is that I have resources coming out of my ears.
Right. And so we can shoot you simple emails. And guys, life is a journey. So on a journey, sometimes you meet somebody who's a guide, or you meet somebody who can help point the way down one of the roads. You come to a fork in the road, or you come to a four-way stop, and you're wondering, well, do I turn left, right, or go straight? And sometimes there could be a person going, hey, if you turn left, it looks like this. And you can go on the journey in that way, as opposed to it being, life being a staircase to a destination. I got to go up stair. Now I'm finally here. We treat it like it's like that, but it isn't. Life is a journey, and it's okay to make a left turn sometimes and go a scenic route. Mm-hmm. You don't necessarily have to take the interstate to get to a place, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is that there's another way. There's a way that might have that isn't just the interstate that gets you from point A to point B and is the boring drive. You know, there's the Route 66 drive where there's lots of stops along the way, and you learn new things, and it's not some things unplanned happen and things like that. So we want to offer ourselves up for, you know, any resources or information you may need through that email or through the comments. And if there's any particular topic on home education you want us to unpack a little more and actually go into detail on, be encouraged. We know it's a bizarre time in our country right now and in the world. If you're thinking or on the fence about home education, then, you know, I don't like to say give it a try. I say you're on the fence and there's tension there because you know deep down in your soul there is another way and you're looking for it. And home education or some variant of it, whether it's through charter school or through tutoring, and then is another option that keeps you from the frustration of how the rigid public education system is forcing you to do things now. There is another way, and you can do it. You are enough. I know that you can do it. There are plenty of resources for it, and you do not have to do it the way Uncle Sam or our society says you have to.
No.
Right?
No.
Awesome. Well, I hope that helped. Hope that helped, and we were just sounding mean or anything like that, as you know, because once again, we're on our own journey and we're learning. This is just where we're at in our journey, and so I just want to thank everybody for listening, and say, I hope this helps in your preparedness or in maybe how you're operating with your family, or if you don't have a family yet, maybe gives you some new perspective on things to talk about as you're entering into relationships and may have a family one day.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks for listening.
Be blessed.
Bye.
Bye-bye.